Good morning, and thank you for tuning in to Wake Up with Edie Darling. I'm your host and ambassador of peace, Edie Darling, and I truly count it a joy and a blessing to come before you each week speaking life into your life. For the first time listeners out there and for my valued and growing listening audience, I want to thank you for tuning in weekly. Now, before we go into today's inspiring episode, I would like to personally thank my husband, Chris Guay, for constantly encouraging me to walk out my God given purpose. I would also like to thank the sponsors of this show, WUJM 99 Jams, The Berg, Groove Hub Nation, and Craig Daniels for their support. And to you, my listening audience, my desire is to awaken you to the awareness and knowledge that we are not alone. We are family, regardless of our race, our ethnic background, our cultural differences, our religious beliefs, our political affiliations, sexual orientation, whether we are rich or poor, we are one body. What happens to one impacts the lives of all. This show builds bridges of compassion for God's diverse people through faith, hope, and love. It encourages you on your journey to do more and be more in God. It will inspire you and motivate you to think outside of tradition and prepare you for your greatest potential on becoming a well rounded individual in mind, body, and soul. By focusing on the here and now, the new day that you have been blessed to see, for the time is now to awaken your dormant gifts. The show also actively seeks to bridge the gap between community and law enforcement relations by bringing the community, leaders, citizens, and law enforcement together at a roundtable of peace to address any issue that negatively impacts our communities, impede the safety of all, inhibit investigation, hamper police relations, and tear at the very fiber of our human conditions and jeopardizes humanity. Today's episode is titled When the Unthinkable Happens. And I have the honor to have across from me Jennifer Mitchell. Jennifer has embarked on a mission to tell her 16-year-old son's story, who sadly died at his own hand when he committed suicide in 2019. By educating you, the community, to recognize the warning signs of depression and not being afraid to say something, because in saying something, it may save someone's life. Good morning, Jennifer. Thank you for sharing your son, Ian Esquera's story here on Wake Up with Edie Darling and what you are doing to hopefully help prevent another family from experiencing a tragedy such as this. Good morning.
Good morning, Edie.
Thank you.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much. I want to first just tell you thank you for sharing your story here, because I know that this can't be easy, but in you sharing this story, I definitely believe it is going to impact families' lives for the better. So let's learn about Ian. Tell me about him.
Well, Ian was my pride and joy. He was such a sweet child. He cared about people. He cared about animals too. He really did. He loved animals. Um, he was just a very caring boy. He was on the swim team. He had friends, and he was doing well in school and everything. I always got good reports from his teachers, and they would always make comments about how funny he was in class, and sometimes that got him into a little bit of trouble. But for the most part, he was just a well-rounded young boy that unfortunately I never imagined that I would be losing him ever. I don't think any parent would imagine that.
Absolutely. You mentioned that he had a witty sense of humor. Can you tell me like some of what he would do for that witty sense of humor?
I cannot think off the top of my head, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
It was, I mean, it came naturally for him.
Yeah.
So he would, you could say something and he would pull the word out and then turn it into a joke.
Absolutely. And you said in our pre-interview, you mentioned that it was one of his witty sense of humor that got him in trouble one day at school, where he got a detention, at school. And but that's just being kids, right?
Yes.
You mentioned that you were able to experience a proud mama moment with him. So can you tell us about that moment that you feel is something that you'll always hold near and dear to your heart?
Oh, absolutely. So I have a few proud mama moments, some very specific. The one that comes to, actually two of them that comes to mind. One was where he didn't want to be friends with a specific boy because he was quote unquote a womanizer.
Wow, as a teenager.
Yes, as a teenager. And I was just so proud of him for sticking up for us women, you know?
Absolutely.
I mean, that was definitely a proud moment. And then another one was I used the Lord's name in vain, and my son turned to me and said, "Mother, don't use the Lord's name in vain." And I was like, "Whoa, where'd you learn that from?" Surprisingly, I taught it to him.
And he took it more serious in a sense that then at that moment, then you actually did, but he brought it back to you to say, well, Mom, you taught me this, so I'm going to share the very thing that you taught me back at you. It's very powerful.
It is.
Yeah.
It is very powerful. And that always kind of resonated with me when I thought about it. I'm like, wow, my child took a correction and then turned around and corrected his mom with it.
Right. It's almost like, if you're going to tell me, I'm going to hold you the same standard, Mom.
Yeah. That was great.
You mentioned that at the time when this tragedy occurred, where your faith was, you said that you weren't necessarily walking as close with God until after this incident happened. Tell us about that for a little bit.
So this is an interesting, I don't know, it's interesting to me. I personally, I'm a sign language interpreter. That's what I do for a profession. And I was invited to a deaf Bible study. I started attending this deaf Bible study for my own personal gain to, improve my own skills. But in the process, I started to find Jesus.
Wow.
I know, isn't that amazing? I never, I was really fascinated and learning, and I was starting to incorporate certain things into my life. However, I did not fully accept Jesus until after my son passed away. And the interesting thing is my son was a believer when he passed away. So that was really the other reason why I decided to go full-fledged and accept Christ into my life, is because I want to go to the same place my son is at.
Right.
I mean, how cool would that be? I get to meet Jesus and my son at the same time.
Yes. You gotta love that.
Yes.
It's amazing that, as you said, your son, was a believer, and how in his death he brought you closer, to Christ. So I did want to ask you another question. As we're moving forward here, did your son ever display any signs of depression that would lead you to believe that this could have happened?
No, honestly, no. I mean, nothing more than what you would expect from an average kid. Being tired, not wanting to do homework, or something to that effect. I know, like, with his technical devices and stuff, there were problems there. Like, if you want to discipline him and remove the device, I mean, it would be a full-on temper tantrum.
Right.
But I see that with all the kids.
Absolutely.
And so to point that out as that one incident as a problem, I think it's just a problem at whole. When it comes to, devices and technology and everything. But my son, in general, nothing completely out of the ordinary that I knew of. However, you can only know what you know.
Right.
And there were a few things that had happened, or he had said,
Mm-hmm.
that I didn't know that they were technically signs of depression
Mm-hmm.
until after the fact.
So, what was one of those things that he said that you now look back and you actually see it as a sign of depression? What was one of those?
So his father and I, we lived in two different households,
Mm-hmm.
and I took care of specific responsibilities that would be like taking him to the doctor, his
Mm-hmm.
doctor's offices, or going to school events and stuff. One day when I picked him up from school to bring him to a doctor's appointment, he did tell me that he was sorry for being such a burden.
Mm.
And that hurt when I heard that.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, I had to reassure him at that time that he wasn't a burden.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes life for us adults can be overwhelming, and that he shouldn't think that way. But at no time did I ever think that that little phrase right there
Mm-hmm.
could be referred to
As a
depression
warning
as a
sign.
warning sign.
Right.
Possible depression, possible suicide,
Right.
until after the fact. And that was just when I finally decided to go, to what is it, the American Foundation of Suicide Prevention.
Mm-hmm.
And I looked up I started reading all their warning signs, and I was just like, when I saw that phrase, I was really mad at myself,
Yeah.
to be honest.
Right. And I can't even imagine that feeling of being mad at yourself, as we sometimes feel like, did I miss something? But, as we talk about this and you're telling this story for others, I don't want you to take on that sense of being mad at yourself. Release it, because you're now telling Ian's story in order to help other parents and children who are out here. Because in this case, this was a young man, but also a juvenile, right? Who's still trying to get in tune with emotions, and how depression comes out, how it looks differently for juveniles versus how it looks for adults. But you did mention that there was one incident that took place on this cruise ship. But if you could just tell us about the blackout moment really quick, and then what happened with the words that he said that caused, some concern for you, that you actually talked to his dad once you got back from the cruise.
Yes. So my son and I, we had a summer vacation where we went over to Italy, and we were going to take a Dalmatian cruise.
Mm-hmm.
We did. We
Mm-hmm.
got on the cruise ship, and everything was really good.
Mm-hmm.
He met some other kids, that were on the same cruise ship. They were from Europe, so legally they could drink
Mm-hmm.
on the cruise ship. My son, being an American, was not allowed to drink, and
Mm-hmm.
because he's American,
Mm-hmm.
and our drinking age is 21.
Mm-hmm.
Well, the European kids decided to provide the alcohol for my son.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't know this until recently, but apparently also provided some extra stuff too.
Mm-hmm.
And Ian blacked out and became he got belligerent,
Mm-hmm.
to the point where he was screaming, yelling, and
making some
threats where he wanted to like jump off the ship, and security will never get him. And this was the first time I ever heard him say stuff like he didn't like his life, and he wished he wasn't alive, and those are things that concerned me a lot, because I never heard my son talk like that before. And later, after we got off and I was talked to his father about everything that had transpired,
mm-hmm.
his father assured me that it was a blackout moment, and Ian doesn't even remember ever saying any of that stuff, and he is fine, and he doesn't need counseling. It was a one-time event. And I said okay to it. Not that I felt like confident that that was actually the case, but I felt like, how would I explain how I feel? But I don't know. I guess I wanted to accept the fact that what I was being told was actually the case
Right.
and everything would be okay.
Right. So then, what do you feel, being that you had that moment of, okay, he said these things, but you had that gut feeling. You kind of ignored the gut feeling, but like you said, you just wanted to believe that that was actually the case. And then he takes his life. And then, what do you feel, without going into the details of the how and all those other things, what do you feel played a part in him taking his life?
Social media, 100%.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I mean, it so without giving details, there was just a lot of things on social media that
Mm-hmm.
he himself had put up there,
Mm-hmm.
and they were downright scary, to
Mm-hmm.
be honest with you. Things that a child shouldn't be doing.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
And you
but
talked about the algorithms and the, like, if he researches something and how that kind of pours into it a little bit more of what he was doing and how it kind of played on his mind.
yes,
Yeah.
so the social media algorithms and stuff, so you can like something or put a comment, and then all of a sudden that's the content that you're receiving. And whereas my social media had, I don't know, butterflies and rainbows,
Mm-hmm.
his social media were full of danger videos, adrenaline junkies, people putting themselves at risk, all for the attention of social media. And so this was his entire world, and everything he saw, he actually believed this is what everybody is doing.
Mm-hmm.
At least that's how I think. I truly believe that. I mean, there was a time where, even with my social media, I thought, oh, everybody in the world agreed with me.
Mm-hmm.
But I think we were just learning about the algorithms back
Right.
then.
Right. So you have done a couple of things to, of course, not just fight back, but educate the community. And you started a nonprofit organization called Ian's Way. Tell us a little bit about that.
Okay. So, Ian's Way, we designed so that way teenagers can talk amongst themselves, but preferably in a more secure group setting where we have a mental health professional overseeing it, so that way they can provide any tools or resources on to help kids, I don't know, live,
Mm-hmm.
in today's world.
Mm-hmm.
uh, I mean, I'm not a mental health professional, so I don't know all of their little tricks that they've been taught
Right.
throughout schooling and stuff. But what we wanted to do was create a safe environment.
Mm-hmm.
So if there were kids having some problems or social issues, or maybe they're just lonely and they want to just join a group,
Mm-hmm.
we created this place where they can go, and we call it talk time.
Mm-hmm.
So they can go and talk amongst themselves, and then there's a mental health professional there to help give them any tools and resources that they may need to deal with life on life's terms.
Yeah.
Our goal with that is that these kids will actually be able to take it into their adulthood life, and hopefully will never have issues from that point forward.
And then you also decided to file legal action.
Yes. So yes, we. I decided to file legal action regarding the things that we found on social media
Mm-hmm.
that were extremely concerning. And
That you felt had contributed to your son
yes,
taking his life.
yes, absolutely. So, unfortunately, when it was brought to the police department, they didn't investigate that aspect of it, and
But it was important for you
it
to get closure.
it extremely important, and it took time.
Right.
It took time. I mean, it was a God thing when it even happened.
Yeah.
You know, I had been trying to get into my son's iPhone for since he passed away,
Mm-hmm.
and we weren't able to do that. However, we were able to get into all of his social media and do stuff like that.
And you mentioned a God moment of you going early in the morning and hearing how some other parent was experiencing something similar to you. And that's how you found, you know, to pursue the idea of pursuing legal action.
Yes, well, that's where it was a complete God moment. I mean, so couldn't get into his phone, and I just happened to be driving, and I'm listening to my Christian radio station, and it pops up and says this there's this mother who was suing Snapchat for her daughter's suicide.
Mm-hmm.
And it was exactly what I needed to hear at the exact moment. And I was able to look up that lawyer
Mm-hmm.
and find him. And I was so grateful that he took my case.
So, if you had to recommend to families out there, right, what would you say to them, to trust your gut, of course? What else would you want to say to parents?
I want to say check all devices.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't not just look at the devices, but check out the apps.
Mm-hmm.
Because I heard of apps that are supposed to look like normal apps that
Mm-hmm.
you would have for other uses, but they're really not. That
Mm-hmm.
they're secret apps for social media.
Mm-hmm.
But also check your kids. And
Mm-hmm.
if you could avoid having your kids go on social media, I would recommend
Mm-hmm.
having not allowing them to go on it at all. Um, if
But in this day and age, we know that that's not always the case, but at least building that relationship with your children, that they feel that they can have a conversation with you and that you can say to them, if I'm going to be paying this phone bill, or regardless if you're paying a phone bill or not, I want to see what you're on. And knowing who because this is one of the things that we talked about, is knowing who your children's friends are.
yes,
Because one of the things that struck me in doing the pre-interview with you was that no one called you when he was in crises, and that his life could possibly have been saved if someone would have been courageous enough, to say something.
yes, and that was the other reason why we had created Ian's Way,
Mm-hmm.
is because we noticed that the kids do talk amongst each other,
Mm-hmm.
and that was part of the issue, that they did not, no one did speak up.
Mm-hmm.
And I had a lot of kids actually tell me how my son helped them in their time of need, and I was thinking, oh, that's so beautiful. But then in the back of my head, I'm thinking, well, what happened with my son?
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, what happened with his time of need?
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of like, I don't know what happened there,
But you're committed to helping.
yes.
So I'll close us out with this. If you or someone you know is contemplating suicide, there are resources available. 988 Suicide and Crisis Lifeline is now active across the United States. To learn more, visit 988lifeline.org. Or in the event of an emergency, do not hesitate to call 911 or your local emergency hotline number. Every moment and every life counts. and every life matters. I hope you were encouraged by this message of faith, hope, and love. And I want to personally thank you for tuning into this episode of Wake Up with Edie Darling titled When the Unthinkable Happens. If you feel your community, business, organization, or government entity are stuck and can't seem to move forward for the sake of all, and you desire a peaceful resolution, I am here for you. Also, if you have a unique story of how you and your community turned a negative situation around through faith, hope, and love, I would like to hear from you. Email me at awakenyourdormantgifts@gmail.com. And please don't forget to follow me on social media. But before we close out this episode, I would like to leave you with this parting prayer. Father God in heaven, we come before you and humbly as we can, seeking you right now. We know the needs, you know the needs of your people. Your people are hurting, crying, and simply lost without you. Reintroduce yourself to your people, Lord. Teach us your ways. Reveal yourself to us like only you can. Open our eyes to receive your truth, that truth which sets captives free. For whom the Son sets free is free indeed. Psalms 23:4 says, Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadows of death, I will fear no evil, for thou art with me. Thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me. When incidents like this happen, Lord, we need you to comfort our hearts. Help us to establish a personal relationship with you. Like Saul, later named Paul in the Bible, may we have a road to Damascus encounter with you on this life's journey, that we may distinguish your voice clearly from that of ourselves. Build us up daily, guide us, and reassure us that you are with us. Awaken our spiritual gifts, Lord. May we use our gifts to glorify you. May we never become jealous of the gifts of others, but to always encourage one another to be uniquely you, for we are wonderfully made in your image. Father, we pray. Amen.